You are welcome to another episode of the Organ House Concert and Seminar Series. My name is Modupe Kachi. As you know, this series comes to you from the music department at the Mountaintop University, which is affectionately known as the Organ House. And this is a safe and welcoming space for all of us, for scholars, for composers, for performers, educators, and anyone who loves music. It is a space for us to explore, to create, and to share. We're all about diving deep into music research and performance with a special focus on the incredible musical and cultural heritage of Nigeria and Africa. It's a place where we can champion new ideas and critical approaches to music that are both locally relevant and yet globally resonant. You know, this is a space it is a home for all our musical passions. Here we can freely share ideas, we can ask questions, we can make suggestions. I'm so happy to invite you into our space once again. Just a bit of housekeeping. We would like you to please follow us on all our social media platforms. We're on X, which was formerly known as Twitter. We're on Instagram, of course, our WhatsApp group, and also, most importantly, our YouTube page, where we have curated many interesting topics, many interesting conversations for your learning and for your listening pleasure. So please do not forget to follow us on all our social media platforms. During the course of the seminar, we will put all our handles in the chat so that you can follow us. I would also like to remind us that for our reading session, on the first Thursday of February, which should be the 5th of February, we will continue our discussion on Professor Agau's book. And it will be our pleasure to have Professor Agau himself lead this discussion. We'll be discussing the 4th chapter of his book, so you do not want to miss that. Also, which is very important for us, our upcoming symposium, which will be between the 13th to 17th of July, is coming up, and our call for papers will be closing on the 10th of February. So this is us calling for papers from all our scholars, our educators, our music educators, to please send in their papers. It will be closing on the 10th of February, and you do not want to miss out on that. So please take advantage of that. The link to sending your papers will also be put in the chats. Once again, you are most welcome. And for today's seminar series, we would like you to join us to reflect on the themes and topics explored in January, starting with a critical reading session followed by a tribute and a panel discussion on music education. January's sessions reflect a broader discourse on music education and social change in societies. Central to this discourse is the question of value, impact, and the nexus between music education and development across societies. In this session, we reflect on these themes and topics while situating them within the broader social and political contexts of Nigeria and Africa. And to help us with this, we will be having our very own in-house organ house postgraduate researchers join us for a recap, for a roundtable discussion and recap. I'll be asking them to introduce themselves now. I want to start with Grace Adegoke. I don't know if you're there. Would you want to unmute your microphone and give us a good introduction? There you go.
All right. Good evening, everybody. My name is Grace Adegoke, and I'm a postgraduate researcher at the Mountaintop University, Organ House. My research intersects around ethnomusicology, musicology, and it's a privilege to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Grace. Thank you. I will be calling on Mrs. Tokwe Obalade for her to unmute her microphone and introduce herself.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Temitope Obalade, a postgraduate researcher at the Mountaintop University. My research intercepts ethnomusicology, urban studies, and digital archives. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So, to start off, we would like to do a recap on the reading session that we had on Professor Agawu's book. And I'd like to invite Grace to just set the ball rolling on that particular seminar series we had.
Okay. So these two chapters, in January, we touched the second and the third chapter of Agawu's work. And in in chapter 2, Agawu made mention of access and ownership. In chapter 2, Agawu showed us the power play when it comes to archive and their motive. And when we want to look at how this archive works in this part of the world, which is Africa, you can see that they are not archived here with us and they are not accessible, which on the other hand, is not giving us the privilege to be able to assess what it is for us. Most of those things that we call the African works, they are there at the global north. And by the time we will say that we want to get access into these works, we might not be able to get it. So the power play at the root of music, which stems from this global north, it highlights some issues like the access towards this archive. Most of the archive being built, they are built in the European world and the United States, whereby we, by the time these people or the African scholars want to get the particular information they want to get, is either they start planning on, or how can we get the fund to travel over to these places to get what we want. And the other way, it shouldn't be like that, because if you are going all the way to, I mean, 200 or to 3,000 kilometers to get an history about yourself, there is an issue that needs to be sorted out. So Agawu was pointing out these things, that it shouldn't be done like that. Rather, as African scholars, we should see how we can bring this archive into the African culture, into the African society, so that it will be accessible. And that's the place of ownership that I made mention earlier. That who owns this thing? Is it the African scholars or the global north, that's the European scholars that write about the Africans? Then he went on to talk about the fact that the African scholars should do more of writing about themselves, instead of allowing the Western scholars to write some things about them, because at later on there can be some misconceptions about information being delivered. Then he made mention of how they are forced to use the Western language. Then he said that in a place whereby they are appreciated, that's the Westerners, they are appreciated for using their own languages. But by the time these African scholars want to use theirs, it seems as if they are not allowed in that particular society. So then, and this applies to reading also. You can see that there is a dominance of Western ideology and epistemology when it comes to the African musicology. And Agaud made a particular statement. He said, that African rhythm, in short, is an invention, a construction, a fiction, a myth, and ultimately a lie. That is what they say. And that's someone like Ibon made a statement that Africans are they are rhythmic in nature. That when you see a black man, you can see rhythm coming from that black man, paraphrased. So these Western scholars, they feel and they believe that um, every African scholars or every African they see, the next thing that they see there is reading, whereby Agawu made mention that that is a lie, that Africans are more than reading. It is not just about readings. There is melody, there is harmony in their work, and we can just look at in context, we can say Ekiti, for example. They have melody in their music, and whenever they're singing in thirds. So they can't you can't just say that Africans don't have melody in their word or they don't have harmony. Then he spoke about transcription, whereby he said that we shouldn't be forced to create another type of a notation system. Rather, we should be able to use the notation system that is fueled by the word system. Because if we want to occupy the world system, if we want to occupy the global world, we can't say that we want to use something entirely different from what the global world says. Because if we do that, we won't be able to balance the power play that is coming in between. And he made mention that he tried to explain that Africans shouldn't hide under doing things just their native way. They should be able to dominate the global space using the tool that these Westerners are also using, so that when they are, let's say, analyzing or they are studying their music, they are forced to study their music on a global scale. So something like if you are analyzing or studying Bach, or you are studying Stravinsky, you are studying it in the same way you would want to study, let's say, a to-do music. So you are not doing it in a separate way. And that's when you made mention of sameness and difference. So it is not about we doing something entirely different that makes us unique in quotes. Rather, we should be able to use that thing that is viewed by the global system to be able to carry the African music, so that even someone that is not an African can also understand the music of Africa. So basically, everything Agawo is trying to talk about, just trying to talk about the African education and musicology, also assess that we shouldn't just leave everything to these Western scholars, but we ourselves, the African scholars, should be able to portray our work and drive the right narratives. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Grace. Thank you. Thank you for giving us that overview of the reading session. Um, Basically, from what I remember, what stood out for me was the fact that there is a serious power play that is present when it comes to the discussion of African music. And we could see that represented in both the two chapters, the chapter on the archives and the chapter on rhythm. So it's something that we need to be conscious of, when we are discussing African music, and then the way it even affects us now in the present, especially with our music education, because we're talking about music education and social change, is the fact that even if we don't have our archives here, how do we build on our music education? Could it be that this is one of the reasons why probably we are having a problem or a structural issue with our music education now in Lagos or in Nigeria or in Africa? So thank you so much for that. Which brings me to the recap of our tribute to Mr. Ebenezer Ekundayo Omole, who was a music education stalwart in Lagos and Nigeria, and his work speaks for him. His mentees and those who he has groomed speak for him, and it brings me to the thought that Marcus Garvey made, talking about the fact that a people who do not have knowledge or without knowledge of their past history, their origin and culture, is like a tree without roots. Discussing Mr. Ebenezer Omole's legacy brought this thought to my mind that it is very important for us to discuss the history of music education in Nigeria and to also discuss the works of the social agents who have made music education what it is right now in Lagos and in Nigeria. And when we study the life of Mr. Ebenezer Omole, we realize that, first of all, he wasn't an overnight success, which is, for me, something that I would really encourage the new generation of music educationists, music scholars to understand that if you cannot be a master, you cannot be a master if you were never a student. Borrowing a leaf from Mr. Omole, before we saw him as a conductor or as a director, he was a chorister. He was a student. He started singing in 1959 at the Anglican Church, Irolu Remo. This was 30 years way before his government appointment. And of course, he stood on the shoulders of people like Christopher Oyeshiku and even Laz Ekweme. He joined his chorale. So the point is, legacy is a relay race. Mr. Omole was able to accomplish the things he did because, one, he had pedigree, he started off, and he was consistent with his work, which is something that we would like to emulate. Then, obviously, we now come to the era of when he was appointed as the head of music and music education in the Lagos State Ministry of Education, and we see that right there, even before that, where he established the Lagos State Schools chorale, he had a passion for music that he wanted to impact the state secondary schools. And he now took music from being an extracurricular activity to a co-curricular activity, to one of the staples, one of the identities of Lagos State schools at that time. And because of that, we have a lot of organists, choristers, music educators who have now benefited from that and have now been established in their different schools or different choirs. Okay, so this is something that I also want to point out, that it is important for us to have the importance of bureaucracy. Who is our point man in the Lagos State government or in the Nigerian government when it comes to discussing music education? Because of Mr. Omole's pedigree and because of his consistency, his work spoke for him, and he was able to be appointed, as the head of music and music education. So for us to, or for the present crop of music educators that we have today, please let your work speak for you. Be consistent. Be as selfless as Mr. Omole was, so that you are able to make decisions that will affect music education positively here. And then if I could just borrow a leaf from some of the comments that were made on that day, if I remember, where some of his mentees were talking about how passionate he was about certified musical exams like ABRSM and the Muson exams. He believed so much that a musician should be certified so that you have something to show for all the work that you have put in. You know, your practice, your instrument. Excellence was his watchword. And he knew his material. That was something somebody else mentioned, that he knew his stuff. He was said to be probably the second largest library, musical library, second to probably Ngbo, if I remember correctly. So this is also for our present crop of music educators. Please be well cooked, be well baked. For you to make a lasting impression on your society around, you need to have that knowledge, and you need to know how to use that knowledge of music education. So these are the things that, for me, topically resonated with me, you know, when that series was held. And I will be passing the baton now to Mrs. Tokwe Obalade, if you are there.
Yes, thank you very much, Mrs. Ige, for the introduction and for that beautiful review. So I will be doing a review of last week's session, which was titled Restoring Music Education in Nigeria, Positions and Strategies. I will be doing a topical overview so as not to reiterate what has been said. The seminar theme represents a critical intervention in ongoing debates about the place of formal music education in contemporary African societies. While Nigeria has emerged as a global powerhouse in popular music production and cultural export, this visibility marks a deep and persistent decline in structured music education across public institutions. The topic foregrounds a paradox that is increasingly characteristic of African musical landscapes: vibrant music creativity coexisting with fragile educational infrastructures. By centering the discussion on the Nigerian Guild of Composers, Choral Directors, and Music Teachers, the seminar moves beyond diagnosis to advocacy. It reframes music education not merely as a curricular subject, but as a professional, cultural, and policy-driven ecosystem that requires collective action. In this sense, the topic represents a shift from individualized concern among educators to organized strategic engagement with national policy, professional identity, and cultural sustainability. First, let us contextualize the decline of formal music education so that everyone understands what we're talking about. Over the past 3 decades, formal music education in Nigeria's public, primary, secondary, and tertiary institutions has steadily declined. This decline is not isolated, but embedded within national challenges, such as economic instability, policy inconsistencies, inadequate funding for the arts, very important, and the prioritization of science and technology-oriented disciplines. Music, like many other art subjects, has increasingly been perceived as non-essential, recreational, or excusable within formal schooling. Now, the seminar rightly situates this decline within intersecting structural factors such as class differentiation and unequal access to cultural capital. Music education in Nigeria has gradually shifted from being a public educational good to a largely private privilege. accessible mainly through fee-paying schools, religious institutions, or informal apprenticeship systems. This trend reinforces social stratification and undermines the democratic potential of music education as a tool for creativity, identity formation, and social cohesion. Now, we'll come to NGCCD, that is the National Guild of Composers and Music Educators. We come to NGCCD as a strategic intervention. The emergence of NGCCD represents an important movement in the professionalization and collectivization of music educators in Nigeria. Rather than functioning solely as an artistic or compositional body, NGCCD positions itself as an advocacy-oriented organization committed to policy engagement, teacher mobilization, and institutional reforms. This organization's emphasis on mobilizing classroom teachers is particularly significant. Teachers are often the most affected by curriculum erosion, poor working conditions, and policy neglect, yet they are rarely central to advocacy structures. By foregrounding teachers as agents of change, NGCCD challenges the marginalization of practitioners in educational decision-making processes. Furthermore, NGCCD's commitment to peaceful advocacy and policy solutions reflects a strategic understanding of Nigeria's political and educational system. Rather than confrontations and the organization adopts dialogue, documentation, and coalition building as tools for reform. This approach aligns with broader African traditions of intellectual activism, where professional bodies engage the state through negotiation and evidence-based persuasion. Now, today, the relevance to music education today. Many African countries face similar tensions. Although the seminar is grounded in Nigerian experience, its relevance extends across Africa. Similar tensions between flourishing popular music industries and weakened formal music education systems abound in other African countries, such as Ghana, Kenya, South Africa, and Tanzania. Music education struggle with underfunding, curricular marginalization, and a lack of trained teachers sometimes, despite rich musical heritages and global musical influence. I'm citing Murphy and Fortley, 2015, in their work on music education in Nigeria, and Yende, 2024, in our work Unveiling Barriers in South African Music Schools. The Nigeria case thus serves as a microcosm for continental challenges. It is not an isolation. NGCCD's model offers a potential framework for other African contexts, a professional guild that integrates composers, performers, educators, and scholars under a shared advocacy agenda. This integrative approach is particularly relevant in Africa, where rigid separations between academic, traditional, and popular music often undermine holistic music education. Now, let's talk about the policy, the curriculum, and the African nation state. The discussion of policy issues in the seminar highlights a broader challenge facing African nation states: the tension between post-colonial educational legacies and contemporary development priorities. Music education in many African countries remain caught between inherited colonial curricula and under-resourced attempts at indigenization, which brings about a lot of tension and sometimes confusion. NGCCD's advocacy focus focus brings attention to the need for coherent national music education policy that recognize music as both cultural heritage and creative industry infrastructure in the Nigerian context and by extension, Africa. Policy neglect of music education undermines long-term long-term cultural sustainability, even as governments celebrate short-term global success in popular music exports. Professional identity and collective voice. Another important dimension of the topic is the assertion of professional identity. By naming composers, choral directors, and music teachers explicitly, NGCCD challenges the invisibility of music professionals within educational and cultural policy spaces. Implications for the future of African music. What is the implication of this series, of this particular session, and the interviews that we had with stakeholders of the NGCCD? For African music scholars, the topic raises important questions about the relationship between research, teaching, and advocacy. Music scholarship cannot remain detached from the conditions under which music is taught and learned. The decline of music education directly affects the future of African research, documentation, and creative innovation. By hosting and reviewing seminars such as this, academic spaces become sites of intervention rather than mere observations. The seminar thus represents a model for how universities and scholarly communities can engage with professional bodies to shape the future of music education on the continent. Well, to conclude this review, the topic represents more than a national concern. The topic, restoring music education in Nigeria, represents more than a national concern. It speaks to a continental moment of reflection and calibration. In the context of Africa today, where music continues to be a powerful marker of identity, resistance, and global presence, the restoration of formal music education is both a cultural and developmental imperative. The seminar reminds us that without strong educational foundations, Africa's musical vibrancy risks becoming disconnected from its intellectual, historical, and pedagogical roots. Ultimately, the discussion affirms that restoring music education is not an act of nostalgia, but a strategic investment in Africa's cultural future. And so, it is not only the job or the duty of NGCCD, but the responsibility of every music performer, composer, teacher, and even directors to ensure in every capacity, in their little capacity, that music education is not pushed into extinction in our time. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that well put together review. Thank you. Thank you for reminding us that restoring music education is not just the purview of, professors. It's everyone's responsibility, you know, because it is not just about nostalgia, it's about restoring the African culture. I mean, if we put it in that perspective, then we understand the gravitas and the weight of it. Thank you so much, Ms. Tope Obalade, for that. So we have, now come to the point where we would like to open up the floor to all our viewers who have been patient with us listening to our review. If I'm sure you would have maybe a question or a comment, or maybe a question you couldn't ask, during the other seminar series in January, I would like to invite you now to please unmute your microphone so that, or raise your hand so that I can call upon you to give your comment or your suggestion or to ask your question. I would also want to use this time to say that all the links for our social media platforms have been sent to the chat. So we'd really like you to please click on those links and follow us so that you can have, interesting conversations. Okay, so I have Mr. David Aworele. Your hand is up. Could you please unmute your microphone and give your suggestion or comment? Please unmute your microphone, Mr. David.
Hello, good afternoon, yes.
Good afternoon.
I must confess that so far so good. There's been a blessing, I would say. I'll make that word. I hope it doesn't sound too sanctimonious.
Sorry, we can hardly hear you.
Can you hear me, please? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Can you hear
you.
me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay. Yeah, I said it has been a blessing for me attending the series. I think this should be the third time that I attended this series. So for me, it's a learning process for me because when I attended the last seminar and I saw the passion of Mr. Daniel and of course Missy Gay, I mean, for what I feel that I had passion about, I knew that okay, I have a long way to go. So essentially, this discussion is not something we can really sleep on. You made a statement that resonated with me, and it's not just about music, but anything at all. The past, to really bring or build a new future, you need to understand the past. If you do not have a grip on the past, you cannot really build something formidable for the future. And I really appreciate the submissions from the various researchers. It's already give me a cue on how or when to how to direct my own research because before now I don't think ethnomusicology will be a thing, but now that I'm seeing discussions around ethnomusicology, I mean, where there are other specializations that an average musicologist want to, further their studies on, I'm now seeing the reason why, even though it has its huge, tremendous challenges, that's why this series and the consistency in this series is important. We want to try to really bring our past, find ways to dig deep, to speak to people that are custodians, physical custodians of what African music is all about. So, having said that, so I think one of the things we need to do at the level of music education and imbibing these things is a lot of things have been said, but one very key thing is we as musicologists, how much do we even relate with ourselves? I've always believed in the power of relationship. When I mean relationship, first of all, if you don't give a foot, you might not be able to carry that energy. So our energy must match each other. So if, for instance, we have a group like that WhatsApp group that we have, and we have at least a huge number of us that really carry music to art and feel that it's not just about, of course, we're trying to go about our basic lives, sorting ourselves out, organizing my choir, making sure that I pay my bills. But still, there's still a a calling of purpose, a calling of what people say. I've never heard of that name, Ebenezer Omole, before until, yes, that's the truth. Yeah, so for someone that did music history, did all of those. So,
Wow.
what am I saying in essence? We need to really, really connect. I don't know how we're gonna work. Of course, I know that there's connectivity going on. I know that there's, relationship building network going on, of course. But I just feel that the consistency, I need to commend the organ house. I need to commend every single person, Mr. Oladele Ayorinde. I've had to sit down, back at some of your YouTube videos, connect. Even though it's not up to a month that I joined the socials group and I saw the seminars, I got interested and they've been fascinating. I've heard or listened to renowned musicologists speak, and I'm like, okay, this is where I want to be. Yeah, as much as I'm trying to put food on my table,
Mm.
I'm sorry for the long talk, but all
Please
I'm
go
trying to
ahead.
say is this journey, this fight is not a fight for a year. Guess what? It's not a fight for 10 years. At other times, it might not even be a fight for 10 decades that will benefit from what we're doing. But the consistency, please, organelles, we need to keep it going on. And I pray God help us in Jesus' name.
Amen. Amen. Thank you so much, David. Thank you. I appreciate your comments, and you are a good advertisement, so to speak, for all our engagements here at the Organ House Concert and Seminar Series. This is what we live for. We discuss these things and we put them out there so that it can cause a spark, cause a change in the hearts and in the hearts of people and in the society at large. I remember that I mentioned on the comment last week, when we were talking about the NGCCD, if I'm not wrong, where I was talking about the fact that if we're not passionate about it, we will not see a change. And that's something that we can take away from the life of Mr. Ebenezer Omoli. He was passionate. He put his money where his mouth was. He was passionate about music education, and he had the pedigree to back it up, and he had the consistency. In fact, I think someone mentioned, I don't know who exactly it was, mentioned the fact that it is important for us, whoever wants to do their research, on social agents who have made music education what it is now in Nigeria. We can pick him up as as a case study, which would really be nice, at least for people who have not even heard about him. It would be something, it would be a way to introduce him or reintroduce him to, to the upcoming generation of music educators. So thank you so much, David, for that wonderful reflection. Thank you so much. I don't know if we have any other person who would like to say something. Yes, yes, David, I see in the chat you have written, legacy is a relay race. Yes, it is. Yes, it is very important for us to know that it's a relay race. Thank you so much. Do we have any other comments? Any other suggestions? Any other questions? I also remember when we had the last series, right, last week Thursday, where the one of the discussants was talking about maybe creating a village, where, and the joke was, where do you want the village? Should it be in the village or in the city? Creating a village of musicians, music educators, just a pool of where we can get people from who have a passion for music. And a thought occurred to one of us. In fact, Grace and I, Grace Adegoke, Mrs. Obalade and I were talking about it and saying that talking about this village, maybe a good place to start would be to say, you know what, can we even create a formidable archives for music education. Get books that have been written on music education from generations past till now, talk about the lives of social agents like Mr. Ebenezer Omole. We have Laz Ekweme. We have, just those foundation social agents who have fought to make music education what it is, tell their stories, get their biographies, get their music, and just have a collection where it's accessible to us as music educators. Maybe that's a good place to start. I don't know. I'm just throwing out that suggestion. We had that in-house, discussion before the seminar series started. Whatever it is, we have to all understand that we are social agents in our little spaces. And that was what Ebenezer Omole lived for, right? And that is why he has a lot of mentees all over the world, if I may say. So we should remember that we are all social agents too. We are agents of change. We need to carry this message of music education far and wide if we really want to see any change occur. Okay, do we have any other comments? Do we have any other comments? Okay, if we do not have any other comments, let me please, I think we should put the flyer up again. We really are very excited about our symposium, which is happening between the 13th and the 17th of July. And I want to just bring it up on my screen. Yes. We are very pleased to announce for the call for papers for the second Organ House International Symposium scheduled for July 2026. The theme is representing African music in a changing global order, reflecting on African musics and studies in African music today. We would please like you to submit a 200 to 250 word abstract and a short bio of 100 words to the Organ House Seminar Series at gmail.com. I'm going to put that right now in the chats. Organ House Seminar Series at gmail.com. We strongly encourage you to submit your well-researched papers aligned with the topic areas detailed on the symposium flyer. This promises to be a significant event in the scholarly calendar, and we look forward to receiving your contributions. So our last seminar series was very insightful, very interesting. Just putting that on the group now, on the chats. Our two keynote speakers are Professor Agau and Professor Bode Omojola. And we had a wonderful time with them in our last symposium, and we're looking forward to having a more scholarly, more in-depth interaction with them, and with all of our scholars to come on board. So we're really asking to please send in your papers for our symposium. Don't forget, next month, the first Thursday of next month, which should be the 5th of February, we'll be having Professor Agawi himself lead the discussion on the fourth chapter of his book, Representing African Music. So I would like you to please stay glued to all our social media platforms so that you can keep abreast of this. And please join us, for it is going to be very interesting. So if we do not have any other comments or questions or thoughts, I would like to say thank you so much for hanging out with us, for joining us on this episode of the Organ House Concert and Seminar Series, where we we have done a recap of the January seminar series. Thank you so much. We're looking forward to having you again next week, same time, same place. My name remains Modupe Igekachi. Thank you so much and have a wonderful day. Bye.